Well, I hadn't planned on doing it, but I went ahead and tabbed Bulkhead 12 and 9.5, these two central bulkheads. I tabbed them to the bottom. Don't ask me why. Just seemed right. Tabbed both sides of both of these bulkheads. Nothing special about the tabbing. It's easy tabbing because everything's flat. Straight. There's 3 sections across the forward end of 9.5 here because of the way the cleat is on the bottom. And I'll just feel good knowing that I've done everything I can. Since I did the sides, none of this is stuff I was going to do from the get-go. I've just sort of changed my mind as I've gone along. A little stronger is not going to hurt anything here. So these are all tabbed in. One of the steps I needed to take care of before I think about epoxy coating the inside of this hull. I gave all these 4 pieces of bulkhead lower tabbing quick sanding with 80 grit paper, mostly to just lightly touch up the edge, the 2 edges, and lightly scuff the surface. I've not cleaned up or anything, so there's dust in there. Did all 4 of these, 2 sides of these 2 bulkheads. So that's all ready to go. One more thing off my list. I haven't cleaned up because it's going to get dusty in here from exterior hull work, but I'll vacuum it up when I need to do any work. After sanding this transom with 80 and then 120 grit paper on my 6-inch sander and by hand, pretty much where it needs to be. The fill coat aspect of it on this aft surface is totally fine. It's pretty much where I need it to be, so I'm not going to do any more there. And the way it's fared in here, I'm pretty happy with overall. A little bit of work needed down on the lowest end, right here at the chine fillet on this side. So just a little bit of touch up there. And there might be a little more fine tuning after primer, but I don't like to go too far with the sanding at this stage. It's too easy to just keep sanding and sand through stuff. And in the end, high build primer covers a lot, and there's a lot more work to be done at that point. So I kind of like to get the boat to the stage where it is nice, but then get some primer on it and finish up afterwards. That's one of the key points of the key purposes of high build primer in my system. And the port side, again, pretty good overall. That's pretty fair. This is just 6 ounce. It's not very thick. A little bit of work down at the bottom here, just in this last couple of inches. So that'll get a quick application of filler. And the stem's going to need a little bit more fairing because this is 10 ounce cloth. It's a little thicker. So I'd like to get another trowel in here and bring this out just a little bit. Got a bit of a hard edge here from the way I troweled it, and then a little more work down at the bottom as well. Otherwise, it's mostly where it needs to be. A little more touch-up sanding, a couple places. Now that I've cleaned it, I can see a few places that just need to be hit with sandpaper. So I'll do that the next time I sand. And the other side. This I can just feel a slight still going up here, so I want to bring this fairing compound out a little more. So that's what this next application will focus on. The fiberglass is smooth and fill coated, so that's good. And then down here again, this transition area just needs a bit of touch up. So I think one more application pre-high build on that will be good. All these hull seams I'm calling good. There wasn't much work to be done on those. Here at the stem, I applied more fairing compound to both sides and used a wide trowel to spread it out. So that's probably going to bring me pretty close to where I need to go. And a little bit of extra work down at the bottom and the chine fillet. It's both sides here. So we'll sand that once it's cured and see where we end up. At the transom, it was mostly these lower corners on both sides. A little bit of fine tuning down at the chine and the fillet. The tabbing is well blended, so I didn't do any work there. And here on the port side, same basic thing here. Inside the boat, I filled these holes that I bored out in the bulkhead where the screws were located. I also filled all these screw holes in the frames, everywhere it's going to be exposed. This is one application. There will probably be another. This is wicked exciting, but it's all part of the process. Same back here on this aft bulkhead at the aft end of the cockpit. Filled those screw holes, even though that may well get covered with a piece of trim. And up here at bulkhead 2, filled these screw holes as well up top. It's a new day, and I'm here just to sand yesterday's application of fairing filler on the stem, transom, and on the screw holes inside the boat. And I didn't film any of it, but here we are. This is the stem. I've sanded this with 120, and I'm pretty happy with how it is now. And I'm going to call this good till after primer, and then any further work it needs will happen after high build primer. But I cleaned up the forward edge of the stem a bit, so there's no more low spots there. And this second round of fairing brought this out so that it feels nice and smooth here. There's not going to be a noticeable transition at all. And if there is, I will do some fine fairing once I get the high build primer on. At the transom, my work was limited just to these two low areas on the sides and at the top of the chine. So I cleaned that up with sandpaper, and that's looking pretty good. Again, we're going to call this good until high build primer. And the same on the starboard side. It was only this very lower area. Little work on the top of the chine here, and this is looking pretty good. So that's going to be fine for calling the exterior of this hull basically complete and ready for primer. Inside the boat, I lightly sanded the fill over these various screw holes and then applied a second coat over everything. Everything needed a little heel tap to get filled up completely. There's really not much to say about this sort of hole filling work. It's one of those things that you have to do, and it takes some time. So you get to see it too. But this will just make this look nice when it's painted. And finally, this forward bulkhead, these screw holes up at the top. Next small task is to install a couple cleats on the inside of the hull to finish out this outboard well platform area. I've got cleats on the transom and the forward bulkhead of the space. I just need a couple short cleats on the side for support. They'll be at a slight angle, and so I have to transfer the plane between this after cleat and the forward one to the side of the hull and epoxy in some, what are they called? Cleats. And I can't use any screws to hold them because I don't want to penetrate the hull now that it's glassed on the outside. so I'll use some other techniques to hold them in place. I made this really simple jig just to help me easily transfer a line parallel to the plane of these existing cleats. It's just a piece of plywood with a straight edge and a notch cut out to go around this support. And the bottom rests on each cleat, and I just traced underneath it where it touches the hull. And there's, oops, where is it? And there's my line, and there's the other side, same thing. So for these, I like to leave a couple little spots, put some hot glue in there, just enough to clamp it while the epoxy cures. That's how I can do this without any screws. So without further ado, here are my cleats on the outboard well. Just one on each side. They're the same. They're glued in with epoxy and are currently being held with 2 dabs of hot glue on each one. The hot glue just helps secure it there while the epoxy cures, so it won't slide or anything. Just 2 little, like 1-inch spots. And in this case, that's more than enough to hold this securely. It's a good way to install little stuff like this when you don't want to or can't use a screw or a clamp or whatever. I've filled a little bit of a fillet at the top with leftover epoxy and cleaned up underneath. It's basic stuff. Just one of those little laundry list items that's got to be taken care of. Up here in the forwardmost compartment, I need to install a couple cleats at the same level as that one on the bulkhead. And these cleats will eventually support the bottom or floor of a sort of storage well, mainly for an anchor rod. I think I'll install these so that the platform, once installed, will actually be a little higher on the forward side. And that way, when I put drains in the sides of the boat, which are spec'd in the drawings, and which are necessary to drain this particular space, then I'll know that it'll drain. The drawing actually shows 2 drains per side, but I think that's excessive. I'm going to do one at the aft end, and I'll just angle this platform up a little bit so that it has a natural inclination to drain aft. So 2 simple cleats here, maybe one across the inside of the stem to support it, but I don't think that'll be necessary. So just some basic cleats here as well. This is a really awkward height in here. Here in the anchor well, I made a mark about 3/4 of an inch higher up here at the stem, and then struck a line between the aft cleat and that new mark. So that'll give this a 3/4 inch fall over its length, which is about 17 inches. And I'll glue the cleats in with their tops even with that line, and that'll give me the slight angle that I want on this platform. And here at the stem are 2 more cleats, same thing. They're temporarily secured with a couple dabs of hot glue and epoxy everywhere else. I just leave a couple spaces in the epoxy for the glue and then put the hot glue on right before I put it in and hold it as needed until the glue holds. And then I just smoothed out the excess epoxy and made a tiny fillet at the top corners to make sure that's nice and well sealed. And this will give me a platform that angles aft by about 3/4 of an inch over its length, more than enough for routine drainage. I'll put one drainage hole on each aft edge at the corner once I cut and install, or at least once I cut the platform itself. I'll figure out the height and drill those through the hull. I wanted to get these cleats in before I do any epoxy coating inside the boat because I want all the structure to get a coat as well. So that's why I've been doing these right now. This cockpit is very deep, which is one of the things I like about the boat. It's very secure and comfortable and out of the weather as much as possible, but it's very tall and it's going to be kind of hard to get in and out of without any seats because I'm not planning permanent seats. They just take up space and wouldn't be comfortable, and mostly we don't need them. We'll use portable chairs, but some sort of a step partway down would be handy. So that's one reason for what I'm about to do, but the other reason is we plan to take our dogs out, and I figure they need a way to get their paws up so they can look out over the side, because otherwise they won't be able to see out easily. And they're capable of jumping all the way to the top to look out, but it'd be more comfortable if they have something somewhere in between. So what I'm going to do is install, these are just blanks right now. These are 3-foot long 2x4s, and I'm going to use these and shape them to fit the side of the hull because there's a bit of a curve here. And once I get the final positioning figured out, I'll shape the ends and install them. But these are going to serve as that little platform that I'm talking about. It's just wide enough, 3.5 inches. It's enough to step on as a human, and it's certainly enough for golden retriever paws. So that's what this is all going to be about. So there is a little shape to this hull. It's not crazy, but I'm going to try. I've used a scribe this pencil mark on here. Same on both sides. It'll get me around this tabbing. Just give me the best bond that I can. So I'm not relying on too much of a thickness of epoxy. It's within the realm, but I'd rather get this as close as I can. So I'm going to trim these down to that size. I've got it so the top is 16 inches off the deck, which seems a fair compromise. And the aft end will be 18 inches ahead of the bulkhead. And that leaves me like 3 feet up here, so it won't interfere with the helm or hanging out up here at the forward bulkhead. So let's trim these down and see what we have from there. So here's where we ended up with these little steps, dog steps, whatever you want to call them. They're 3-foot pieces of regular 2x4. I scribed and shaped them to the slight hull shape that's there. There's a little curve, and there's the interference of the tabbing, which sticks out a little bit on each side. So I shaped them accordingly so that they'd fit more closely. Pardon me while I climb in. And they're secured right now with an epoxy mixture and a couple dabs of hot glue to hold them. And I also have a couple of little temporary blocks underneath glued to the hull to just help support it so they can't slide down. They're all epoxied in place. It's all full of epoxy in that gap. That'll hold it securely. Honestly, that would probably be enough, but when that epoxy's cured, I'm going to install a piece of tabbing on the top and bottom just to make these very secure so that one never has to worry about footing. But that'll be after this is cured. This is the port side. I put a nice little angled profile that's a 60-degree angle, leaving about an inch square at the inside, and a healthy round over on both exposed sides. So these will be smooth and pleasing to the eye and to the touch. And again, once the epoxy cures overnight, then I can glass these in place top and bottom, which will make it really strong. And we won't have to worry about ever standing on these. So there you have it, very simple. They're 16 inches off the deck to the top surface, 18 inches from the aft end of the cockpit. And that's just enough to be a little step to help people in or out, or as a step for the dogs to put their paws up on and look over the side. So here I'm working on a panel for the outboard well, for the top of the outboard well. And if you recall, I didn't have a full sheet of plywood from which to build this, or a full width. It's somewhat over 4 feet wide. So early in the process, when I was working on the bottom and planking the bottom, I determined that I had more than enough scrap to build a piece for the outboard well, which is basically just a cover. I had more than enough scrap to build whatever I needed. So here I've started that process. I've routed out a groove on both sides of these 2 scraps of plywood. I'm going to make a flush tabbed seam on each side. And I decided to do it that way here because that way on the bottom side, where this has to seal against the cleats in the outboard well, the fiberglass will be flush or just below flush on the bottom side as well as the exposed top side. And it's easy enough to do here on the bench. I have the panels screwed to the bench here so they can't move, and to hold them flush, I had to put one up here inside the routed area, but that's okay. I'll just keep the glass clear of that. This is wider than I need. So these pieces are way oversized, but I've got the factory edges lined up. So once this is glassed together, I can trim it to the proper width on the table saw. And I'm just about to put in the tabbing here. I've got a couple of router digs here, so I'm going to mix up some of that slightly thickened epoxy and trowel that in here as the wet out coat, and also to even that out. And I'll do one side and let it cure, and tomorrow or shortly thereafter I'll flip it and put one layer in the other side. And here is one side of this seam all glassed up. This clamp here is just to hold the edges closely together here. They were slightly misaligned. So there's a piece of plastic there, and that clamp is just over the seam itself. So this will cure, and then I can flip this and do the same thing on the other side. I've already routed it out, so it'll be just a quick piece of glass, about 2 feet long. And then this panel will be ready to be sized as needed to fit in the outboard well. So I just cut this 6-inch biax tabbing to fit the top of one of these, and all 4 pieces required should be identical. But I'll test this on the others, and then I'll use it to copy and cut 3 others. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom, underneath, and of course on the starboard side. Just 1 layer on each side. My next step, after just lightly sanding around the edges of where this was epoxied in place, was to install a little fillet all the way around the ends and underneath on both sides. And on the ends, that will be something visual and cosmetic, because the ends will be exposed. The top and bottom are going to get tabbing, so the fillet is there to ease the transition to the hull, both sides of the boat, and install it while these fillets are still at least green, if not wetter than that. The final structural step on these dog steps and or people steps was a layer of fiberglass on each side, above and below. This is 1708 6-inch biax. It's 17-ounce cloth with 8-ounce mat stitched to the back. Port and starboard. This will add a lot of strength to this, not only to its connection to the hull, but also as kind of an outward flange here on the bottom, as well as the top, that'll help hold this so that it won't want to twist off the hull when you step on the outer edge. It'll be very strong. So that's all set. Only thing left to do to that is a light sanding once it's cured. There's the first side all sanded and ready for whatever's next. And here is side number 2 of this outboard well blank, now glassed over the seam. So when this is all cured, next step will be to trim this to width and length, and a little bit of fairing over whichever side is going to be exposed, just for cosmetics.